Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Recent Spins, where we delve into the vast magic meadows of my collection and we pull out records which have recently been granted temporary access right upon the glorious turntable or the compact disc machine. So the first record that I have to talk about today is Bebop Deluxe. This album is called Sunburst Finish. I got this from the local retro store for £11. So yeah, this album over here was this was John Leckie's production debut, and for me, John Leckie is actually somewhat of a legendary producer, to be honest. You know, the guy has worked with Radiohead, Muse, The Verve, The Stone Roses, XTC. He really cut his teeth as a tape operator in the early 70s on albums like Plastic Ono Band and All Things Must Pass. And then he went on to become an engineer for Pink Floyd, working on albums such as Medal and on Wish You Were Here as well. Gradually working his way up to becoming a producer, and this was 1976 when he finally got to be sort of the top dog of the studio, the producer, and this was his debut. So Bebop Deluxe is sort of the outfit of guitarist Bill Nelson, and he was a very competent guitar player of that time, and I quite like his vocals. His phrasing is somewhat reminiscent of like David Sylvian or Brian Ferry a little bit. You know, in parts this album almost reminds me of like a more light-hearted, bouncy version of Marquee Moon by Television. Maybe a bit of Steve Harvey and Cockney Rebel in there as well. This album cover is a bit saucy, with a nude woman standing in a glass beaker wielding a flaming, smoking hot red guitar. It reminds me of the old James Bond intros during the Roger Moore era. Very creative design. The sound on this record is punchy and clear, plenty of bass where it needs to be, especially in the breakdowns on the track Ships in the Night, which reveal a very pleasing dynamic contrast between the different sections. On this album we're also treated to effortless guitar excursions from Bill Nelson, particularly on extended solos on tracks such as Crying to the Sky. Curiously, I also own this album on cassette tape, but this is a very chewed up cassette tape. Presumably this tape probably endured many hot summers, probably in someone's van. You know, I think people remember cassette tapes sort of being a bit crap and a bit wobbly, but that's because they were in everyday use and they were in cars a lot, which is less than ideal situation for them. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about cassettes later in the video, so stay tuned for that. But I digress. Let's move on with the next record. We have Fatboy Slim with You've Come a Long Way, Baby, released in 1998. This is a nice half-speed Abbey Road remaster reissue of the album. I wanted to get this for a long time, but it was over £30, and yeah, I only got it when I recently saw it in HMV, reduced down to £23. So yeah, the sound quality on this is as good as this record can possibly sound. You know, a lot of the samples are pretty lo-fi, but we have deep pounding kick drums and flourishing honey drip snares, which sound very crispy and high fidelity. So most people will know on this album tracks such as Right Here, Right Now, The Rockefeller Skank, and of course the classic Praise You, which is frankly one of the best pop songs of the 1990s. You know, real moments of sampling genius, really, from Norman Cook. You know, I think there's something very endearing about the fact that he could get a bunch of random sort of crunchy old records out of Oxfam and, you know, wield together like a classic pop hit out of purely just samples. And I think this album is just totally revolutionary because of that. So on the album cover we have an image of Big Lee. Only joking. Yeah, this gentleman on the front here was never identified. The image was taken from like a fat person's Pride festival in the early 1980s, and yeah, no one's ever found out who this guy actually is. Not even Norman Cook. And you know, he really is, like, this is such an iconic image. When you think of Fatboy Slim, you do think of this guy's image. So yeah, You've Come a Long Way, Baby, one of the best sample-based albums of all time. You know, it's kind of incredible how this really did go fully mainstream. You know, I also like some of the deep cuts on here, such as songs like Love Island. That song's got some serious attitude about it. And also Build It Up, Tear It Down. The album finishes on a track called Acid 8000, which is a very trippy, hypnotic track. Speaking of the devil, also got this. Dub Be Good To Me by Beats International. This was Norman Cook before he became Fatboy Slim. To be honest, I think this is a great song. I think it's a great mashup, you know, taking the beat from the Clash song and then taking Just Be Good To Me, that 80s hit, and then sort of doing a great new vocal on it. incorporating a bunch of different samples from, like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly and things like that. I did find it slightly posery how they sort of made this out to be like a band when really it was just Norman Cook putting a bunch of samples together and then a girl singing over it. And they went on top of the pops kind of as a band. I like the graffiti style artwork. I think one of the band members was like a graffiti artist and they got this kind of low quality image of it. I really like that. Next up I found U2, the best of 1980 to 1990. This compilation immediately kind of took my interest because of the years that it covers, 1980 through to 1990. It's really the golden period, arguably, this and Actung Baby is all you need by U2. Well, apart from, of course, the Joshua Tree, maybe Unforgettable Fire. But this is the period when the group did have a lot of credibility. You can't beat 80s U2. And I know it is very fashionable and trendy to hate on U2. They really do stand up there with the Coldplays and the Nickelbacks of the world, often for good reason. Bono's endless irritating antics and just generally being annoying with all their virtue signalling, and that one time where they put the album on everybody's iPod whether they wanted it or not. I mean, that's arrogance, beyond belief really. But if this band had disappeared in a puff of smoke after Actung Baby, would they still be perceived the same way today? Or would they just be seen as a great 80s band and that's it? People will probably be commenting on this video like, oh, technically they were annoying in the 80s as well. I'm just trying to make entertainment. Kid Capri, what do you reckon? Next up we have R. Kelly with If I Could Turn Back the Hands of Time. Very touching sentiment this is. Fucking fabulous. Right, next up we have Skeleton Tree by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Really nice album. Really good sort of abstract lyrics from Nick Cave on this album, which is all kind of set to the backbeat of these strange kind of ambient jazz instrumentals. I mean, some of the songs don't even really have a song as such in the background. It's more just sort of ambience, musical ambience that you would maybe hear in the background of a TV show. It almost reminds me of like the Breaking Bad soundtrack or something. But yeah, we have Nick Cave's sort of Leonard Cohen inspired surreal meditations on grief. This album was famously tied to a big personal tragedy of Nick's where his son fell from the cliffs in Brighton, and this album was his way of processing the grief and getting through it. The track on here, Distant Sky, is a really beautiful song. It's a really tear-jerkingly beautiful track. And there are many other moments of sheer gorgeosity on this record, such as the springy synthesizers on the track Rings of Saturn. But yeah, I bought this and my brother immediately said that album cover is a bit of a rip-off of the Talking Heads' Fear of Music album, which segues us into our next album, The Talking Heads' Fear of Music. So I've never been a massive Talking Heads fan. It seems like all of my friends and family seem to just absolutely love them. And despite that, never really got into them. I've dabbled in the Talking Heads. I've seen the Stop Making Sense film, and I've got Remain in Light on vinyl, and there's some great tracks on that album. But yeah, never really truly loved them up until recently when I listened to this album, and blimey, this album is incredible. This is just a classic album. It's so good. There's nothing else like it, and it's got some of Brian Eno's best production work that he ever did. That's part of the reason why I think it's strange that I never got into this, partly just as a Brian Eno fan. This is one of the best records he ever produced. I'm surprised I didn't get into it, especially being a big fan of an album like Here Come the Warm Jets by Brian Eno. This is like that, really. It has a lot of the same ethos and aesthetics as that album. David Byrne is really on fire on this album. See what I did there? David Byrne. Take a look at these hands. Take a look at these hands. Some really exceptional lyrics and vocal performances. Some of the best the guy has ever come out with. Some of the stuff on here is so bizarre. It almost reminded me of sort of Captain Beefheart. Quite wild, primitive expressions and perhaps a little bit sort of fashionably autistic. The track Animals is a favourite song because it is so deranged. The closing track on this album, Drugs, is like going to another planet. It's like entering the black hole. Yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic. So it kind of leads me on to my next record, which is worlds apart from the last one, because it is Talking Heads' Fear of Music. That's right. I've got two of them. I only went out and bought two, didn't I? Why do I have two of these? Wow. Essentially, my first copy of Fear of Music, I bought it a couple of years ago, got it very, very cheap, and obviously never really listened to it, but I was listening to it recently, having gotten into the album, and I thought, blimey, this record sounds really, really worn out, you know. It's got that sound to it that when records are very worn out, you know, there's a lot of distortion in the vocals, for example. So I thought, you know what, I got this one really cheap, don't worry about that copy. I'll go on eBay and I'll spend some proper money on a nice, fresh, not new pressing, but an original pressing in much nicer condition. So I ended up finding another one on there for a really good deal, like £16, and it was far more mint condition. The record arrived at my house, and essentially I found out that it was more of a generic pressing. I put it on the turntable and I immediately thought, hang on a minute, this isn't as worn out, but it actually does sound duller. And I realised that my original pressing that I already had was a Porky Prime pressing. So if anyone that's in the know, Porky was an engineer and he was like the best in his game at cutting records back in the day. So if you see anything with a Porky Prime or a Porky's in the runouts, then you know it's going to be a good record. Yeah, I thought, well, the new one's a bit duller, so I might as well keep the original. But I think some of the things that are like the less desirable sounds on the original worn out copy that I had, some of them are just facets of the way the record sounds anyway. You know, I was listening to it on Spotify, and I also listened to it on tape as well. I borrowed my brother's tape cassette of it, and I kind of came to the conclusion that some of those sort of distorted sounds are just part of the record, you know, part of the master recording. But yeah, both records have got good instrument separation and things like that. Good stereo. Next up, I picked up Rick Astley, Whenever You Need Somebody. I picked this up at a rummage sale pretty close to where I live for a whopping 50p. And it's in like perfect condition as well. This is obviously a bit of a novelty record, but for 50p you can't go wrong. It's actually a very fun pop album. And also this was sealed as well. It was opened, you know, but it had the shrink wrap on it. Holding it like the Static Traveller, except he wouldn't be showing a 50p record, he'd be showing a fucking 50 grand record and saying, well, I got it in a charity shop, it's alright. Very, very dizzying record. Every single song sort of uses the exact same instrument palette, you know, classic Stock Aitken and Waterman production. You know, I mean, a lot of the songs use the exact same formula, like, you know, Never Gonna Give You Up and Together Forever. They're both like the same song. Both bangers, but they are like, they've got the exact same ingredients. But you can't deny Rick Astley's very deep, rich voice, and it's kind of hard to believe that it is all coming from this dazzling young man over here. You know, really deep, rich voice. Sort of a baritone, I suppose. But yeah, this is a good album to listen to on a Friday night, maybe before watching an episode of Mind Your Language. I said I was going to talk about cassettes a little bit. Recently, I found this in one of my local charity shops. Got it for £10, and it was in its original box as well. It's a Walkman from the early 2000s. I believe it was purchased from Argos, because there's a little Argos sticker, and my mum could kind of remember that from the early 2000s. But yeah, I wasn't sure if this was worth it or not. I just bought it on a whim, paid £10 for it, and I had to break it in a little bit. Like, the playback on it was not great when I first switched it on. I suppose it's just been laying dormant for 20 years. I don't know if it was ever used in the first place, to be honest, because it's in immaculate condition. But yeah, had to break it in a little bit to get it to start sounding really good. Like, even the headphone volume adjust thing was really rough to begin with, but now it works perfectly. So yeah, there was definitely a bit of break-in with this. But now it's up and running. It sounds fabulous. You know, obviously tapes are quite lo-fi, but they have a certain sound which I like, a certain lo-fi desirable sound. And I have got a nice tape deck, but I don't tend to listen to tapes too much on it. So with the advent of this, I can sort of plug in my headphones, and I've been listening to it whilst playing a bit of Nintendo Switch, you know, Mario Kart and so on. And it's really made me reconnect with a lot of my cassettes in a serious way. So one of the tapes that has sounded especially good is this cassette I've got of the first Dire Straits album. This is a 1980s reissue. It's on chromium dioxide cassette. It's like a premium version. Chromium dioxide Type 2 cassettes sound a lot better, higher grade of tape. But this sounds really fabulous. And it's a great album too. I like when they adapt the artwork for cassette and make it look slightly different to the vinyl and CD editions. Also been listening to Laughing Stock by Talk Talk. If you want to get the original vinyl for this, you're going to be looking at spending a lot of money, like serious money. This is released on Verve. This is an absolutely beautiful album. It's very creepy, very sort of haunting, emotional, slow kind of album. It's sort of like a If a haunted house was an album, it would be this. Mark Hollis and the like. Really good to get on cassette. This is another chromium dioxide cassette. These chrome tapes, they're almost like the tape version of Porcupine Cuts, I suppose. They do sound better. And I've also been listening to this, Like a Prayer by Madonna. Wonderful pop album from 1989, often considered to be one of her best. It's certainly my second favourite Madonna album, only to Ray of Light, because there are so many good songs. Some of her best stuff, you know, Like a Prayer, Promise to Try, Cherish, Oh Father, beautiful song. I felt like the chords on the song Promise to Try were a lot more resonant on the cassette version, both actually resonant and emotionally resonant. And also, this cassette is about 36 years old, and when this album originally came out, it actually smelt like lavender, and it still does. Still very much smells like that lavender smell today. It's still scented after all that time, like nearly 4 decades. Still smells quite strongly. So next up, I've got a few Jimi Hendrix pickups to show of varying exciting levels. I picked up this Jimi Hendrix 16 classics, 16 greatest classics. This is one of those low budget compilations where essentially they've licensed a bunch of live recordings, a bunch of obscure recordings, because they're much cheaper than the main recordings. But ironically, this is a best of for Jimi Hendrix, which doesn't have a single song you'd recognise. I think it's a lot of recordings from bands he played in before the Jimi Hendrix Experience. This kind of blew my brother's mind, like he's like the biggest Jimi Hendrix fan ever, and you've got a best of without a single song you'd know. But yeah, they do a cover of Day Tripper on here. There's loads of different stuff on here. But yeah, it's bands Hendrix would have been with before the Jimi Hendrix Experience. But a bit better than that, I found this in an Age UK charity shop. Are You Experienced? I've got this album on vinyl, but it's the American version, but this is the UK version. But this is like a really definitive version of the album, really, because it basically combines all the tracks from all different versions of the album. You know, you have the UK version, but then you get an additional 6 tracks on here, you know, including Purple Haze and Wing Choir's Mary. So yeah, this is really nice to have in addition to the vinyl. Top-notch sound quality too. And also an album which I don't own in any form. We have Bold as Love. Really nice to find that for 99 pence. So this really does complete my sort of trilogy of Jimi Hendrix Experience albums, you know, because I've also got Electric Ladyland, which I found in a charity shop years ago, Fat Box edition with the nude cover. So last but certainly not least, from the same charity shop, I got the two of those Hendrix ones. I also found Hawkwind, Warrior on the Edge of Time. This is absolutely fabulous. This is probably one of the best Hawkwind albums. It's the last album they did with Lemmy before he left the band to form Motorhead. And there is actually a bonus track on here called Motorhead, so you can see the direction he was heading in. I really like the disc on this one, actually. It's got a particular sort of very glossy, thick feel. But yeah, it was a funny coincidence because I've never ever seen Hawkwind in a charity shop before. I was out with my friend Asa when we saw this, and he was kind of mind blown that we even found this at all. Yeah, I love the artwork. It reminds me of the movie Vampire Hunter D, if you've ever seen that. And yeah, it was a funny coincidence because it turned out I didn't know this until a few days later, but I went down to Hive to visit a friend, and they told me that their friend had died and had their funeral on a Thursday, and it turned out to be the same Thursday that I picked this up. But it turns out that this guy that died was a huge Hawkwind fan. And they showed me a few photos of him wearing the Hawkwind t-shirt and stuff. So, yeah, just a bit of a strange coincidence, really, that it turned out to be the only time I've ever found Hawkwind in a charity shop was the day that the guy had his funeral, who was a big fan. So, yeah, that's it. That was it for the update. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you very, very soon. Goodbye.